I'm Mark Halperin.
And I'm John Heilemann. And with all due respect to Rand Paul's government surveillance victory lap, Rand, they're still listening. Shh. Happy National Heimlich Maneuver Day, sports fans. On the show tonight, a message from Bernie Sanders, a love note for Scott Walker, and Rand Paul's hate mail. But first, a Lindsey Graham. She cracks me up. The South Carolina three-term senator announced today that he's running for president. It makes him the 9th Republican to officially enter the field. It's going to get even more crowded soon. At a rally in his childhood home of Central South Carolina, Graham talked a little about his humble roots and a lot about the dangers of a world exploding in terror and violence.
The world is exploding in terror and violence. I'm running for president because I have the experience, the judgment, and the will to deny the most radical regimes the most dangerous weapons.
Mark, we're going to talk more about Lindsey Graham later in the show, but for now, here's my question. Is this man running to claim the presidency or to make a point?
He's running to do both. His performance today was low energy. It was less like a movement, the launch of a movement, and more like a guy who was just having a time with his community, proud, as they are of him, proud of what he's doing. I think he can be a huge factor in this race, bigger than most people do, but it'd be hard to see a path to the nomination for him right now.
I respect Lindsey Graham enough to think that he is intelligent enough to know that he is not going to be the Republican nominee. And I think he is running largely to make a point, and not to make a single point. He has a distinctive brand of foreign policy hawkishness. He's worried about his party being pulled into a more isolationist place by Rand Paul. Witnessed this debate over the Patriot Act over this weekend, and I think he wants to be a counterweight to Rand Paul, and he wants to make sure that the party stays on what he sees as the true path in national security.
16 candidates, scenarios galore. I'll give you one right now. Rand Paul wins Iowa. Rand Paul wins New Hampshire. Lindsey Graham wins South Carolina. They head into the South. The party's desperate to stop Rand Paul. The establishment is. Lindsey Graham beats him in the Southern primaries. Why couldn't that make him the nominee?
I'm not saying there is not a scenario, but I think that it's a pretty far-fetched scenario. There are enough other establishment candidates, whether it's Jeb Bush, whether it's Marco Rubio.
But they got to win states. This is a guy who could win a state.
Yes, but the problem, as you know, is that South Carolina is going to get discounted by Lindsey's favorite son status.
All right, we're going to talk more about Lindsey Graham, listen to more of his speech, but let's move on. Topic 2, Bernie Sanders is now drawing bigger crowds in Iowa than any other presidential prospect of either party. In a story chronicling the Hawkeye State's outbreak of Bernie mania, the New York Times says that Thursday in Davenport, a whopping 750 people showed up to hear Sanders speak. Compare that to around 50 people who turned out in the same town for Martin O'Malley there on Saturday, the day O'Malley announced his presidential campaign. But that's not the only big crowd Sanders has drawn. Others in Iowa turning out for him, and his rise is reflected in our new Bloomberg Politics Des Moines Register poll that shows Hillary Clinton is still dominating the field. She's at 57% of the vote among likely Iowa Democratic caucus goers. But look at Bernie Sanders' rise. He's gone from 16%, or from 5% in the last poll in January, 16%, tripling his support over the course of that time when he did announce for president. O'Malley clocking in at just 2%, although our survey was completed just as O'Malley was formally entering the race. Look at Bernie Sanders' number, though, 16%. That is a huge jump up. He is now being touted, John, by many people as the threat to Hillary Clinton. My question to you is, can Martin O'Malley in Iowa nationally become the Clinton alternative, or is it Sanders now?
I was hoping that you were going to ask the question, is there anything that can stop Bernie Sanders from being our next president of the United States? Look, I think that Martin O'Malley is a more conventionally attractive candidate than Bernie Sanders. Obviously, younger, fantastic looking, more of a mainstream liberal than a far left liberal. I think he could have his moment in Iowa. I think this Bernie mania thing could burn out, and you could have a flowering of O'Malley fever before we get to January and February.
You can also easily imagine a scenario, and there are other Democrats who may run, but you can imagine a scenario where Sanders weakens Clinton rhetorically and maybe even in the caucuses, and then O'Malley steps in, and Democrats panic if there's a Clinton controversy, whatever. Yeah. So I think O'Malley, because he is a more conventional candidate, could easily end up benefiting from Sanders' strength. In the short term, though, he better start catching on. He better move up in the polls now that he's in.
He's got to do two things. One is he's got to have an economic message that's as distinctive as Bernie's, and the other thing is he's got to start going after the Clintons in a more pointed way. All right. Now for the Republican side of our new Iowa poll. Few 2016 contenders have spent less time campaigning in the Hawkeye State this cycle than Scott Walker. Turns out, Iowans don't seem to care. The Wisconsin governor has extended his lead in the Iowa poll, pulling in 17% of the vote, followed by Rand Paul and Ben Carson at 10% each, and Jeb Bush and Mike Huckabee at 9% each. Mark, what is it, if he's not showing up in the state, what is that accounts for Walker's growing strength in Iowa?
We've seen other people from neighboring states not do well in Iowa, and
Remember Tim Pawlenty?
And also Tommy Thompson. Walker not only is from a neighboring state, he grew up in Iowa, and I think not just are people learning that and they like that fact, but they're comfortable with him culturally, and they know about his record in Wisconsin, not just from hearing about it in across the border, but because he's been there enough that people are starting to burn through. We heard that in our focus group. I think Walker there right now is in a stronger position than our poll even indicates, in the sense that he hasn't been there much.
Right. There's two things to say, though, additionally. One is the geography thing, really. If you look at if you look deep in these numbers, you find out that a lot of his strength comes from the northwest corner of the state, which is familiar because they get Wisconsin media. The second thing is he is making himself into an Iowa candidate. His positions on immigration, very popular with the Iowa base. He's running as an evangelical candidate. He's not running as the establishment version of Scott Walker. He's running as the more base-pleasing grassroots version, and that's, I would think, part of the appeal, too. He's running straight to the heart of the Iowa base.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, he's not had much hand-to-hand combat. People have taken on other candidates.
I agree with that.
No one's taken him on yet. Let's see what happens.
And 17, though, a good score. Michelle Bachmann was at 23 this time in the last cycle, so he could easily collapse.
Yep. All right. Early this morning, key parts of the Patriot Act expired. Just after midnight, provisions that once let the government seize phone records in bulk and use roving wiretaps, poof, they disappeared. And depending on your views of liberty and security, you can either blame or thank Senator Rand Paul, who's being accused of blocking a new surveillance measure in order to help his presidential campaign. On Fox News this morning, Paul defended himself and lashed out at his critics.
Nobody really questions my sincerity with my support and defense of the Fourth Amendment and the Bill of Rights. And those who do are just simply, trying to make the debate into a tawdry debate and trying to use personal innuendo, which I think is really beneath all of us, and we ought to have a better debate on the facts.
Now, Paul's victory is going to be short-lived, or at least short-term. The Senate is expected to pass the House bill this week that would reinstate the surveillance provisions, but put some new limits on bulk data collection programs. John, my question to you is, after this fight with the Patriot Act is basically over, has Rand Paul helped or hurt himself trying to become the Republican nominee?
Oh, 100% helped. 100% helped. I mean, if you think about after Paul's relatively good announcement when he got into the race, he sort of disappeared for a while. These are his issues. This is the core of his appeal. He's either going to ride these to the nomination or not, but there's no other way for him. And this is an issue that put him squarely in the spotlight. He loves it that other Republicans are attacking him. He likes being able to draw that contrast. It's all good for him here.
I disagree, because while the liberty agenda is potent, and while I agree his theory of the case is to have to appeal to people who want him to fight, he's made it too personal. I've heard from several Republicans who've said he's talking too much about himself, too much about his being attacked. He's not focused on the principle at stake. And when he does that, when he becomes poor me Rand Paul, the establishment not only turns against him, but turns against him in a way that I think will hurt his chances.
I agree with you about the defensiveness, but I got to say again, this is a victory. It has shown that the Republican Party has moved in his direction, or that he and the Republican Party the base
he can win establishment support, but not acting like this.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, but I'm not sure establishment support's his way to win.
He needs some of it. Acting on principle is always good in presidential politics.
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. All right. By now, you've heard the tragic news that Beau Biden, the eldest son of Vice President Joe Biden and the former Attorney General of Delaware, passed away on Saturday from brain cancer. He was 46. Since then, there has been an extraordinary outpouring of condolences from across the political spectrum and around the country from people who, whether they knew Beau or not, could sense what a devoted public servant and deeply good guy he was, and the powerful connection between him and his father.
He's the father I've always known, the grandfather my children love and adore, and the vice president our nation needs. So tonight, Mr. Chairman, it's my great honor to place into nomination for the office of Vice President of the United States my father, my hero, Joe Biden.
There have been a lot of things said about Beau Biden, Mark. He is obviously a guy who did not take the easy way, who wanted to work for it, who served in the military, did all those things. But the thing is, I know that we know the two of them. We knew Beau Biden. We know Joe Biden. The bond between them so powerful. You could not spend any time with either one of them without having them both gush about each other. I mean, the depth of that father-son bond is just extraordinary. I mean, you can't spend 10 minutes with Joe Biden without him talking in the most effusive terms about his son, and the feelings were obviously mutual. It's almost the ideal father-son relationship as people idealize it in their minds.
Beau Biden was a great guy, great public servant, and touched pretty much everybody he met. And for Joe Biden and the whole family, just tragedy to have his public career when he first got elected to the Senate marked by the tragedy of the death of another child and his wife. And then to have his career, at the end of his career, have this happen, it's really unimaginably sad.
Unspeakably sad.
Yeah.
Unspeakably sad. Our condolences to Joe Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, all of Beau Biden's family. All right. When we come back, more Lindsey Graham. And later tonight, we unveil our Selzer score, a new way of looking at polling in Iowa. We'll be right back.
Not in the actual center of the state, but central South Carolina was at the center of the political universe today for at least a bit. That's where Senator Lindsey Graham announced that he would seek the office of the presidency. And at the, center of Graham's pitch was his distinctive brand of hawkish foreign policy and a bold claim about his own credentials.
Simply put, radical Islam is running wild. They have more safe havens, more money, more capability, and more weapons to strike our homeland than any time since 9/11. They are large, they are rich, they're entrenched. As president, I will make them small, poor, and on the run. I have more experience with our national security than any other candidate in this race. That includes you, Hillary.
So he takes a jab at Hillary Clinton, but of course highlights the fact that they're friends. Look, our poll shows in Iowa what all Republican polling shows, which is foreign policy is a big deal. Is that a distinctive enough message to say this is a huge threat, or is he just like everybody else except for Rand Paul?
I think there's a little bit of that. You know, I think the experience, the issue matters a lot. His level of experience does not, I think, matter as much. It matters some, but where he is on these issues is further to the right than a lot of Republicans are. But within establishment,
how's he further to the right,
well,
as projected today?
Well, if you think about where the base is, I think the base is more in line with where Rand Paul is, for instance, on the issue of privacy in the NSA. But I do think he's not that much further to the right on issues like on where we should be projecting strength around the world and so on, which means it's not distinctive enough for him to necessarily set himself apart in a very dramatic way from the rest of the field.
The one area over the time that he and John McCain have talked about is putting more ground troops in lots of places. Yes. I was surprised today in this speech, that excerpt is representative. He talked a lot about the threat, but very little about specifics. Did not stake out specifics where he might go to say to the hawkish wing of the party, I'm different. I'm not Ted Cruz.
Right.
I'm not Jeb Bush. I'm different.
Right. All right. Let's move on to the next piece of video and sound here. Lindsey Graham's speech wasn't all about world chaos and tough talk, announcing his presidential aspirations not far from the pool hall and restaurant his parents once owned. Graham recalled a time when, after his parents died, he and his sister relied on something many Republicans don't generally speak fondly of: government support.
We lost our parents when I was a young man and she was in middle school. We depended on Social Security benefits to survive. I've been fortunate. I've done better than I ever dreamed. If I and others like me have to take a little bit less and pay a little more to help those who need it most, so be it. And younger people, you may just have to work a little bit longer. As president, I'll gladly do what it takes to save a program that once saved my family.
So Lindsey Graham does care about entitlement reform, but my question for you on this is whether if he's just going to be seen as a one-trick pony, just a foreign policy candidate. Will this message break through at all?
Well, look, Chris Christie has already kind of gotten ahead of him in talking about entitlement reform in a pretty bold way with a fair amount of specifics for this phase of the campaign. I think his personal story is pretty compelling, and I was surprised, again, he didn't tell more of it today. To me, the question is, can there be a narrative associated with Lindsey Graham? Is there a story about his upbringing that he can kind of burn in with folks in Iowa, in New Hampshire, where I think he's going to make a pretty big play? I don't know, because his telling today is lovely. It's a heartwarming story and a heart-wrenching story, but I don't know that he has a capacity, given his nature, to tell it in a way that will really burn in for folks.
Yeah, I just look, I mean, entitlement reform is one of these issues that people here in Washington love. It's not an issue that many voters get excited about, and it's an issue that when he actually starts to put meat on the bones, is not going to be a super popular. It's not going to ignite anybody anywhere.
Yeah. All right, finally, Graham tried to pitch himself to the nation as a guy who's willing to work with anybody, including people in the other party.
To my friends in the other party, on the big things, we share a common fate. I'll work with you to strengthen the country we both love. Our differences are real, and we'll debate them. But you're not my enemy. You're my fellow countrymen. To Americans who trust neither party, I will seek the political common ground our nation so desperately needs to find. That's what I've done before. Don't take my word for it. Examine my record. I got the scars to prove it.
So this is a split in the party, or at least people on continuum. Graham is up there with Kasich and Bush and saying we got to work with Democrats to get things done. What's your sense? Is that a resonant message with the base of the party, the nominating electorate?
I applaud him for adopting that message, and I don't think it's particularly resonant. And I think that's not going to be the ticket for him. And on the one issue where he is what he's best known for and where he speaks most powerfully, he's not bipartisan at all. I mean, in the sense that the positions that he takes on foreign interventionism and military muscularity around the world are ones where Democrats have no truck with him. So it's not like he can point to, on his core issue, examples of places where he's fashioned bipartisan compromise.
And he didn't make a big deal about immigration or climate change today.
Yes, which would be really unpopular with the base.
All right, when we come back, we're going to introduce you to something new. It's the Selzer score, and polling will never be the same after this.
We have been talking all show long about the new Bloomberg Politics Des Moines Register Iowa poll. But with the field this crowded, our next guest says the horse race numbers in these polls can only tell us so much. And she would know because she's our pollster. Joining us now is Jan Selzer, who came up with a new formula to help us break through some of the data noise. Around here, we call it the Selzer score. Ann, welcome to the show. Great to have you back as always. Tell us, what is the Selzer score?
Well, the Selzer score is not the political equivalent of the BCS score, so let me just say that off the bat. It's rather simple and easy to understand. That is, our problem is we have a group of people who are huddled at the bottom. We have a clear front runner, we have an upper tier, and then we have a whole bunch of people that 1 percentage point here or there could really change up their position in the rankings. So how could we spread the field was my goal. The first thing that is important is to get the most votes for first place. So we take that score and we double it. That counts twice. Second place, that's another candidate out of 16 that you're saying you could support. So we're going to count that as part of your Selzer score. And then finally, because you only get 2 votes, and there's 16 candidates, nobody's going to end up with very many. So we added in the percentage. You said, well, they're not my first or second choice, but I could ever support them. I could see myself supporting that person. And because that's not quite as important, we just cut that number in half. We add those 3 numbers together, you get your Selzer score.
All right, so Ann, when you do that for this field of Iowa, for presidential candidates in Iowa, who comes out on top? Whose numbers divide out the way you want to get a sense of people standing?
Well, Scott Walker shows you just how strong he is, because he now has the most points of Selzer's score at 64.5. And the next person up there is 51.5, and that's Mike Huckabee. So you can see that it is spreading the field. George Pataki is at the bottom at 11. So what it does is to create gradations within that field to better sort them out. And some people end up with a better standing because of this, and some people have a worse standing once we take those three factors into consideration.
So, Ann, one of the things that's most noticeable when you look at the Selzer score is the fact that Marco Rubio jumps up in the leaderboard and Jeb Bush falls back. Talk about that dynamic and why, how you explain how this applies in this case.
Well, this is where looking just at that first place is sort of, it undercounts Marco Rubio's potential strength. He has the most number of voters saying he's my second choice. So that helps him quite a bit. And a large number of people who say, yeah, I could see myself supporting him. So he actually moves up. He was tied at 6th with Santorum. He's now tied for 3rd with Huckabee, I think. Yes. Jeb Bush, on the other hand, has a problem in terms of his ability to generate that kind of ever support. So among those who say, well, he's not my first, he's not my second, really, there's a fair number of people who say, and I could never support him. So he actually drops down in a tie he was tied for 4th, and he drops down to 6th. So what this does is sort of say to you, if you're looking to the future in Iowa, you're going to pay more attention to Marco Rubio because he has potential momentum to take off. And Jeb Bush is one more example of the challenges that underscore his candidacy so far.
So, Ann, obviously this poll, like all polls, is a snapshot of where we are now. How hard is it in Iowa and in general for a candidate to turn people from saying, I will never vote for Jeb Bush, to being open to voting for him? Does that happen with enough regularity so Jeb Bush can hope to change things?
What all of these candidates need to do is come and spend more time in the state. I'm really struck when I talk to people about their commitment at this point of saying, you know, I don't really know that candidate, and in particular Jeb Bush. They say, I don't really know him. What that means in Iowa is they've not really heard what his positions are. They've not really had a chance to go and see him in person. They don't feel like they can take the measure of the man on the basis of what they've seen so far. So that ever vote is most changeable by people getting to know the candidate and getting a feel for what kind of president that person would be.
And I want to ask you something. I know we're giving attention to the Selzer score, but I want to really emphasize this. You are the gold standard pollster, really, for America. And I think what you're saying is that you believe that this numerical ranking that you've come up with is actually a better reflection of reality than the horse race number. Is that right?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I think the horse race all by itself gives you a bit of the picture. It's an important bit of the picture. But if you're looking to winnow a field of 16, you need some ways of sort of culling out the bottom and really verifying the people who are in the top half of that list are really the people who are going to be the ones with the greatest potential to stay in the race and to break through with voters and end up on caucus night with a near victory. So it's top 3.
And Selzer, thanks very much. We'll be right back. Our guest tomorrow in studio, George Pataki, presidential candidate. Until then, thanks for watching. Sayonara.